The growing fallout and legal pushback to Donald Trump's efforts to get the DOJ to target and allegedly harass journalists and even their families. Now, a judge has temporarily halted subpoenas that were seeking New York Times reporters' phone records. The subpoenas, we've learned, also targeted spouses and the mother of one of these journalists. And that matters a lot because if there was not a valid, good faith legal reason to do so, if that was rather part of an effort at collective punishment or harassing the family members, that itself could be illegal. Now, Thursday, there'll be a hearing on this. The Times says the subpoenas are a bad faith effort to intimidate the journalists and chill their ability to report on the administration. And the DOJ, for its part, says that the subpoenas are about Times reports on presidential security and that they have a valid purpose. And the Times reports that the subpoenas even came before the security story about Donald Trump's gifted jet. Two of the subpoenas seek records beginning on January 1st, 2026, they write, long before the events that are purportedly the basis of the Department of Justice's investigation. And the prosecutor in charge of these subpoenas, Jay Clayton, just testifying before Congress last week.
Did you or anybody at the Southern District of New York have conversations with anybody at the White House or the Justice Department in Washington, D.C., before you issued those subpoenas?
I can say it this way without getting into the investigation. The protocols require consultation.
Did anybody in Washington, D.C. suggest to you or anybody on your team that you should issue subpoenas in this case?
I'm not going to get into the details. What I can tell you is that we followed those procedures.
So that is testimony about following procedures in general, and that speaks to at least some communication about this. The wider effort, though, by Donald Trump to go after critics and his perceived enemies may undercut their ability to make these subpoenas stick in court. Trump and his Justice Department targeting all kinds of media organizations and prominent media figures, as we can see there. And all of this is happening alongside major shifts in media. The Ellison family is trying to get its merger approved so it would actually take control of CNN and other properties. The effort did hit a small legal snag. We should note a federal judge has paused the merger for 2 weeks, pursuant to states suing to try to block it entirely. And as Trump's DOJ goes after the New York Times, reportedly because he didn't like their stories even when true, he's also been very public about what in any other era would be seen as itself a confession or a scandal, that he views the people taking over these companies, the Ellisons getting CNN, for example, as a chance to have a good owner change the editorial coverage.
You have some good companies bidding on it. I think the people that have run CNN for the last long period of time are a disgrace. I think it's imperative that CNN be sold. The fake news like CNN, like the New York Times and like others, have abused our people. Wait a minute, be quiet. Have abused our people so badly, and you should be ashamed of yourself. CNN does such false reporting, but now they have new ownership, so maybe it'll straighten it out. I doubt it, but it's hard to straighten garbage out.
It's hard to straighten garbage out. Well, that's his opinion. The new ownership he referred to have completed the deal, but it's still under this legal oversight and now at least paused for 2 weeks with this review. The concern is that we have a government abusing power to change what you see and hear, to distort the very fundamental protections of the First Amendment so that you, the American public, if I may be so grandiose, can hear everything freely and make up your own mind. And against that backdrop, we have very credible allegations that the subpoenas of the New York Times, another important independent outlet, are not actually to solve crimes, which under law would be okay, but potentially may be the kind of bad faith harassment that means it's the DOJ, allegedly, and not the New York Times that might be in the wrong. What is going on in this case, and what does the Times need to show to beat back what to a lot of the evidence looks like harassment?
So all eyes are on Thursday in the federal courthouse in Manhattan, where the judge is going to hold the first open arguments about the Times motion to quash the subpoenas. The Times has laid out in great detail that the process by which these subpoenas were issued, their argument is that it was rushed. There's actually some details in this motion that FBI agents with sidearms, holstered, not drawn, but showed up in the driveways of these reporters to serve the subpoenas on a Friday night, basically 24 hours after the Times published its exclusive report on the security concerns involving Trump's new Qatari Air Force One jet. So both the speed by which the government jumped to the action of subpoenaing independent journalists, as opposed to gathering a list of potential leakers within the government, taking the steps that the DOJ typically would under its own guidelines to smoke out leakers within the bureaucracy, all of that appears to have been expedited, or perhaps, we'll find out soon, jumped over to go directly after these Times journalists, who, by the way, many of whom Trump has insulted by name over the years. There's a lot of evidence of the president on Truth Social, in his comments himself, going after the Times, denouncing these individual reporters for the journalism that they've done about his federal government. So the Times is effectively arguing that this was the result of an enraged president who called his FBI director, by the way, directly into the White House to oversee the leak investigation. Again, about 24 hours after the article first appeared.
Well, as the kids say, Nixon could never. By which I mean he didn't get this far. You know, there are tapes of him trying to hint and cajole to get the enemy, to get Haldeman to get the enemy. But you're pointing out, you know, no, you got the actual FBI director in here doing the bidding as if he's the hatchet man. Nixon had a lot more scuffling to get there. You're covering this. You care about your colleagues, but you cover this objectively as a journalist.
I do.
Yeah,
so
go ahead. What you're gonna say.
No, so this all broke, you know, the subpoenas starting being issued around 7 p.m. last Friday night. You know, by 9 o'clock, you know, we had learned about it within the newsroom and were putting up our first story. Now, I've been in touch with the Justice Department, in touch with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan. Their contention, as Jay Clayton in the earlier segment was saying, is that this is an issue of serious, significant national security, that the president, at the time of this publication, was flying over international airspace, coming back from his trip from Turkey, and that the disclosure of this information would have created some sort of risk for not just the president, but with the press corps, with the senior administration officials who were traveling with him on the plane. They do, however, keep going back to this idea that there's a national security concern without really specifying it in too much detail.